The Lord be with you. And with your spirit. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Glory to you, O Lord. Jesus said to his disciples, "As the Father loves me, so I also love you. Remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you, and your joy may be complete. This is my commandment: love one another as I love you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I no longer call you slaves, because a slave does not know what his master is doing. I have called you friends, because I have told you everything I have heard from my Father. It was not you who chose me, but I who chose you, and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will remain, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. This I command you: love one another." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
This past Thursday was my sister's 64th birthday. Hard for me really to imagine that she's that old. Being the only girl and the baby of the family after 4 brothers, Mary Angela, or Angie as we call her, has a pretty special place among us. One which we 4 older brothers did not always appreciate, of course, as we were growing up. In addition to celebrating her birthday this past week, my sister is also observing today Mother's Day, being the proud mother of 3 wonderful children, 2 of them double domers, each having 2 degrees from Notre Dame. All of her children, all 3, are lawyers, following the example of their father, also a double domer. Now, being the only non-lawyer in her family, Angie is often asked how she handles having 4 lawyers in the family. Not a problem, she says. Listen, after growing up with 4 older brothers, it's a breeze. Well, these 2 very special events in my sister's life this week led me a few days ago to the Notre Dame bookstore looking for the perfect birthday and Mother's Day cards to send her. Searching for just the right greeting cards can be frustrating. Oftentimes they speak of love as something gushy and soft, abstract, sentimental, but real love, the love of a mother or a sibling, we know, is much more than that. The word love was mentioned no fewer than 17 times in our readings this morning, 9 times in our passage from the first letter of St. John, and 8 times in our passage from his gospel. The love of which our readings speak is hardly the soft, fuzzy, gushy abstraction found in your typical greeting card. In his first letter, St. John reminds us that God is love. And God's love was made very concrete, St. John says, in a very real way. For God sent his Son into the world that we might have life through him. In fact, the love of God became flesh in the person of Jesus, who in turn gave us the commandment we hear in today's gospel: love one another. How? As I love you, Jesus tells us. Not in some abstract, warm, gushy, fuzzy, sentimental fashion, but as I love you. By laying down your life for one another, as I have done for you. Nothing abstract or fuzzy or sentimental about that. By forgiving one another, as I have forgiven you. Nothing abstract or fuzzy or sentimental or gushy about that. By sacrificing yourself for others, as I sacrifice myself for you. By caring for each other, especially the weak, the elderly, the sick, and the defenseless. By being patient with each other, by being faithful to each other, by reverencing one another, by loving each other unconditionally, as I love you. Nothing abstract or fuzzy or sentimental or gushy about that. Love one another as I love you. This commandment takes on a greater urgency in light of the many signs of declining respect for human life and dignity we see in our society today. Our love for one another is tested by the violence, greed, poverty, injustice, and moral confusion that surrounds us. In our affluent nation, it is estimated that around 14.5% of the general population lives in poverty, including 22% of all children under the age of 18. 1 out of every 5 children, it is estimated, do not know where their next meal is coming from. In so many communities, as we witnessed most recently in New York, where an officer was gunned down, and in Baltimore, violence destroys the hopes, the dreams, and the lives of too many children and too many young people. So many families are torn apart by alcohol and drugs, by infidelity, separation and divorce, and too many children grow up in abusive environments, learning little about self-worth, self-dignity, and basic human, let alone Christian, values. How can we speak of love for one another when since the beginning of this year, over 390,000 abortions have been performed in our country? Christ commands us to love in a way which stands in marked contrast to these grim realities. In this time of intense consumerism, we insist it is not what we have, but how we treat one another that counts. In an age that does not value permanence, we believe marriage is forever and children are a blessing, not a burden. At a time when the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, we believe the moral test of our society is how we care for the poorest, the weakest among us, especially the sick, the elderly, and the unborn. No, Christian love, Christ's love, is not to be found in your average Hallmark birthday or Mother's Day greeting cards. The gospel love we are called to live is less a matter of feeling good as a commitment to doing good, a commitment to a concrete way of living, whether we feel good or not. It is a commitment to loving and caring as did Jesus, whose love and care knew no limits, no boundaries, no conditions. Love one another as I love you. No doubt, the most difficult and challenging commandment we have from the Lord, but a commandment which, if we try to live, will bring us a joy and a peace which no one and no thing can ever take away from us. What greater gift can we share with one another, especially on a birthday or this Mother's Day?